Snow White. Read, listen, and practice. Once upon a time, in a sparkling kingdom nestled between green mountains and vast forests, there was a beautiful princess named Snow White. She was loved by all for her gentle nature, her fair skin as white as snow, lips as red as a rose, and hair as black as ebony. Snow White's father, the king, adored her dearly, but her stepmother, the queen, was envious of her beauty. Every day, the queen asked her magical mirror, mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest one of all? And every day the mirror would tell her the same thing. You, my queen, are the fairest of them all. However, as Snow White grew older, the mirror began to reveal a different truth. It told the queen that Snow White was now the fairest. This made the queen livid with jealousy and rage. She could not stand the idea of someone else being more beautiful than she was. Consumed by envy, the queen decided that Snow White had to go. She ordered her huntsman to take Snow White deep into the forest and kill her. But when the huntsman saw Snow White's frightened face, he couldn't bring himself to kill her. Instead, he warned Snow White to flee and hide from the queen's wrath. Snow White ran through the dense forest, scared and alone. She stumbled upon a tiny cottage nestled in a clearing. Curiously, she entered the small house and discovered it was neatly furnished, with 7 little beds, each small enough for dwarves. These were the 7 dwarves, friendly miners who worked hard in the mountains, digging for precious gems and metals. The dwarves returned home from their mining work and were surprised to find a young girl in their cottage. They were initially wary but quickly saw that Snow White was kind and gentle. She introduced herself and explained how she had fled from her wicked stepmother. The dwarves, seeing her need, allowed Snow White to stay with them. In return, Snow White kept their house clean, cooked their meals, and took care of them. She became an integral part of their lives. Meanwhile, the queen's jealousy didn't die down. She was determined to get rid of Snow White once and for all. Disguised as an old peddler woman, the queen visited Snow White's cottage multiple times, each time trying to deceive her with a dangerous gift. The first time, she brought a tight lace bodice that would suffocate Snow White. The second time, she offered a poisoned comb that would make Snow White's hair fall out. Each time, the dwarves returned just in time to save Snow White from the queen's wicked plans. But on the third visit, the queen's disguise was perfect. She brought a shiny red apple, tempting and beautiful. This apple was enchanted with a powerful poison that would make Snow White fall into a deep, eternal sleep. The queen knew this was her last chance to be rid of her stepdaughter. Snow White, curious about the shiny fruit, took a small bite. Almost instantly, she felt a chill and fell to the ground in a deep sleep. The dwarves returned home to find Snow White lying lifeless on her bed. They tried everything they could think of. They shook her, called her name, even poured cold water on her face. But Snow White did not wake up. The dwarves were heartbroken and refused to leave her side, watching over her day and night, hoping for a miracle. Days turned into weeks, and the entire kingdom mourned for their beloved princess. News of Snow White's fate reached the ears of a handsome prince from a neighboring kingdom. He had heard tales of Snow White's beauty and decided to seek her out. The prince traveled through the forest and finally reached the small cottage where Snow White lay. When the prince saw Snow White's pale, lifeless form, his heart broke. He knew he had to try something, anything, to wake her up. Remembering an old legend, he leaned down and gave Snow White a gentle kiss on her lips. As their lips touched, a warm golden light enveloped Snow White's body. She stirred. Her eyes fluttered open, and she took a deep breath. Snow White had been under the queen's spell for a long time, but the prince's kiss had broken it. Snow White awoke with a smile, and her eyes sparkled with life once more. The prince was overjoyed. He took Snow White's hand, and they looked at each other with love in their eyes. The dwarves, seeing their happiness, knew that it was time for Snow White to leave with the prince to start a new life together. They bid farewell to Snow White, grateful for the time they had spent with her. The queen, upon hearing that Snow White was still alive and had been awakened by a prince's kiss, was consumed with fury. Her rage echoed through the halls as she realized her evil deeds had failed. Unable to face her defeat, she fled into the darkness, her figure swallowed by the shadows of the night. From that day on, she was never seen again, her fate becoming a mystery whispered among the people. Snow White and the prince left the forest together and traveled to his kingdom. They were married in a grand ceremony, surrounded by the 7 dwarves and the people of the kingdom. The celebration lasted for days, with music, dancing, and feasting. Snow White and the prince lived happily ever after, ruling the kingdom with love, kindness, and justice. The dwarves visited often, always welcomed as honored guests. And so Snow White, the prince, and the dwarves lived happily ever after, a tale of true love, bravery, and the triumph of good over evil. Thank you for watching the video.